You know that feeling, right? You get super excited to learn a new language, you download the app, you buy the book, and then, boom, you hit a wall. It happens to almost everyone. But what if I told you that struggle is actually a super fascinating peek into how our brains work? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see what's really going on in your head when you try to learn a second language.
I mean, think about it. It's a total puzzle. You've got a 3-year-old running around, picking up insanely complex grammar, no lessons, no flashcards, nothing. And then you have a smart, capable adult who can barely string together a simple hello. How is that even possible? What makes something that's so effortless for a kid feel like an uphill battle for the rest of us?
All right, so to really get into this, there's a key term we've got to know: L2 acquisition. It sounds kind of academic, but it's simple. L2 is just your second language. L1 is your first one, your mother tongue. And honestly, understanding the huge difference between how we learn our L1 and our L2, well, that's the first major clue to solving this whole mystery.
Okay, let's dive into the big one, what we can call the adult learner's paradox. It's this weird situation where we as adults have all these advantages. We can think critically, we can study, we have clear goals, but somehow kids still run circles around us. So what is going on here?
Well, the biggest piece of the puzzle is this idea of a critical period. The theory is that when you're a kid, your brain is like a super absorbent sponge, just primed for language. There's this window of time when it's incredibly easy to soak it all up. Now, that window doesn't just slam shut when you grow up, but it definitely starts to get a little rusty. Your brain's flexibility, its ability to rewire itself, just isn't what it used to be. And we've got some pretty solid proof for this. There was this landmark study back in 1989. Researchers looked at a group of native Chinese and Korean speakers who had all moved to the US at different ages. The key thing is they didn't take classes. They just learned English by living there.
And the results? Whoa, they were striking. Just look at this chart. The people who arrived between the ages of 3 and 7, their grammar was practically perfect, just like a native speaker. But after age 7, you see this steady drop. And for those who arrived as older teens or adults, their grammar accuracy was way, way lower across the board. It's crystal clear evidence that your age of arrival is a massive predictor of how well you'll do.
So the bottom line is this: learning your first language and learning your second are just fundamentally different ballgames. You sort of absorb your first language like magic without even trying, but L2, that takes real conscious effort. Hitting that native-like fluency is pretty rare, and everyone's journey looks completely different.
So why? Why is it so different? Well, a huge reason is that you're not starting from scratch as an adult. Nope. Your first language is always there, casting this long shadow over everything you're trying to learn.
This creates something really cool called interlanguage. Think of it as your own personal in-between language. It's this unique mashup of the rules from your native language and the new one. The mistakes you make aren't random. They're actually part of a logical system your brain has built to try and make sense of it all. It's your own private dialect.
Now, this influence from your first language is what we call language transfer. And you know, it's a real double-edged sword. Sometimes it helps you out. That's positive transfer. But a lot of the time, the rules of your native tongue get in the way and trip you up. That's negative transfer, or what you might call interference. Let's look at a classic example. An English speaker wants to say, "I didn't see her" in Spanish. Their English brain thinks subject, verb, object. So they might say something like yo no vi la, which is a direct word-for-word translation. You can almost see the ghost of English grammar haunting that Spanish sentence.
But that's just not how Spanish works. The right way to say it is yo no la vi. In Spanish, that little object pronoun la has to come before the verb. It's a perfect example of how those deeply wired rules from your first language can automatically hijack your sentences in your second language without you even realizing it.
Okay, so it sounds like our first language is just this big hurdle we have to get over, right? Well, it's actually more complicated than that. In fact, there's something much deeper going on. It turns out that all languages might share a kind of universal blueprint that our brains are built to understand. This is where things get really wild. Linguists have discovered that all human languages, from English to Swahili to Mandarin, are built on a shared foundation. They all have these common rules and properties, which we call language universals. For example, every single language has consonants and vowels. It's like all languages are different models of cars, but they're all built on the same basic chassis.
This brings us to a neat idea called markedness. The best way to think about it is like a roadmap for your brain. The common, universal patterns are unmarked. They're like wide, smooth highways that are easy for your brain to travel down. But the weird, rare grammar structures, those are marked. They're like bumpy, unpaved country roads that are way harder to navigate.
And what's so amazing about this is that because of this universal blueprint, adult learners often go through the exact same stages as little kids learning their first language. For instance, both groups tend to simplify difficult sounds, learn simple nouns before grammar words, and get the easy verb endings down before the tricky ones. It's like our brains have a default order of operations for building a language, no matter how old we are.
So we've talked about your brain's wiring, we've talked about the structure of language, but we're missing one massive piece of the puzzle, and that piece is you. The learner isn't just a passive sponge. Your own unique psychology plays a huge, huge role.
Yeah, everyone brings their own personal toolkit to the table. Are you more analytical, or do you learn by just jumping in? Are you an extrovert who isn't afraid to make mistakes and sound silly? Or are you more reserved? All of these things, your personality, your learning style, they all have a massive impact on your journey. But if you had to boil it down to the one thing, the one factor that researchers say might be the most important of all, it's motivation. That's the engine. It's what powers you through those moments when you feel stuck and frustrated. Without a strong reason to keep going, even the most perfect learning method in the world is probably going to fail.
And it really helps to know your why. Are you learning because you genuinely want to connect with a new culture and its people? That's what we call integrative motivation. Or are you doing it for a practical reason, like getting a better job? That's instrumental motivation. Both are totally valid, but knowing which one is driving you can be the key to sticking with it when it gets tough.
So when you put it all together, learning a new language is this incredible, complex dance between your brain's biology, the ghost of your first language, the universal rules of all languages, and your own unique personality. The struggle is real, for sure, but it is not impossible. And that leaves us with a really important question, not just for language teachers, but for you. Knowing what you know now, the next time you decide to learn a language, how can you work with your brain's natural wiring instead of fighting against it?